Hello, my name is Kristen Bolden and I'd like to welcome you to The Other Side of History. Now, in this musical, I would like to play for you some of the music of Ludwig van Beethoven and also talk about who this man was. The composers of the Baroque period, they were men such as Bach and Handel, and they lived at a time of musical purity. The Baroque period was roughly between 1600 to 1750. The classical time period in music was between 1750 and 1820. Now, composers such as Mozart and Beethoven, they belong to this classical time period in musical history. In both the Baroque and the classical periods, form and structure was stressed over expression in music. Now, Beethoven, he lived near the end of the time where music had a spiritual goal, and the composers, they were uncompromising, where the music of the Baroque period was mostly religious in nature. The music of the classical period was not so openly religious in nature, but even then, the secular, quote, secular creations of the classical period, they were still, in the opinions of most commentators, saturated with divinity. Beethoven, he lived from 1770 to 1804. And like the other Baroque and classical composers, he opposed the promotion of the earthly and the sensual in music. Beethoven's music appealed to the conscience in man, and he desired to nurture a good direction. As one commentator said of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, in Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, there is a confrontation between mortal and immortal, between man and the supreme. The individual soul finds itself at the point where a choice must be made, to obey the will of God or to stubbornly hold on to its own imperfect traits and indulgences. At length, the individual learns that to surrender to the will of the supreme is actually no loss at all, but the doorway to a far more glorious and meaningful existence. End quote. The Romantic period in music was from 1820 to 1910, and composers of this period were men like Brahms, Chopin, and Liszt. The music of the 18th and the 19th centuries was mostly the creation of individuals who wished to express through their music ideas of spirituality, joy, and brotherhood. However, there was slightly less stress in staying true to the form and the structure of music and more emphasis on expression. While most of the music of the Romantic period is truly beautiful and spiritually uplifting, music became more and more on a horizontal level, where eventually the sensual, ugly, and even inhumane aspects were emphasized in music. This is especially able to be seen in the type of popular music that grew out of the rhythm and blues from the 1950s. Now, Ludwig van Beethoven is universally accepted as one of the greatest of the composers. His works express the deepest and the most profound of human emotions. The composers of the Baroque and the classical period were largely concerned with making beautiful tonal patterns and designs. The compositions, they are exquisite and very charming, but some believe that they lack the depth of feeling that characterizes Beethoven's masterpieces. Beethoven's music, it represents the culmination of both the Baroque and the classical, or the formal period in music. And also it opens the way to the Romantic period of emotional expression. Beethoven was drawn to nature and nature's setting, and he liked best to compose during long walks through the local countryside. Now, in his sketchbook, he says, "The more water, the deeper the tone. The little trill in the violins suggests the chirping of insects. and the flute was intended to imitate the call of a bird known as the yellow hammer or the nightingale. The clarinet is the cuckoo, and the quail the oboe." End quote. So the first song that I would like to play for you is Moonlight Sonata. And it's one of Beethoven's more familiar pieces for sure. Now, Beethoven, we can see, took inspiration from nature, even from the title of the song, Moonlight Sonata. Ludwig van Beethoven's father was Johann Beethoven, and he gave his son, Ludwig, his first music lesson at a very early age. Now, Ludwig, he quickly learned all that his father could teach him. And his father, Johann, he was a dissipated man, mainly interested in drinking and in exploiting his son's musical talents. One of Johann's drinking buddies was also a good musician, and when the two men would return from a drinking bout, they would turn Ludwig out of bed for a lesson regardless of what time of night it was. Music actually took up every minute of Ludwig's time. Now in 1787, Beethoven, he visited Vienna and he met Mozart, for whom he played. Now Mozart at first received Beethoven rather coolly, it said, thinking that the piece had merely been well prepared, that he had played for him. Then Beethoven, he improvised on a theme of Mozart's suggesting, and Mozart, he was visibly impressed, and he told the distinguished gathering of musicians, "Someday this young man will make a great noise in the world." End quote. Now, Beethoven's stay in Vienna was, however, abruptly cut short by the news that his mother was seriously ill. He hurried home, and on the 17th of July, she passed away. Now, Beethoven's father began to drink more and more after the passing of his wife. On more than one occasion, Ludwig had to interpose to rescue his drunken father from a police officer. Those years were hard ones for the Beethoven family. By 1789, Johann Beethoven had become incapable of carrying out his work properly. He was dismissed from the chapel choir, and Ludwig became legally, as well as in fact, head of the family. His father continued to receive half of his salary, but the other half was paid to Ludwig. Johann continued to decline, and in 1792, he passed away. It's been said that it was the musical form of the sonata that Beethoven changed more than anything else. Beethoven never composed quickly and easily. Now, when he improvised at the piano, his ideas, they flowed without any effort. But when he sat down to write, he always seemed to have a struggle. Throughout his life, he wrote down sketches in a music notebook. The story of how he put his material together is all there in this notebook. Now, from the first crude beginning of a theme, through its polishing to its final form, it's all there. He would spend months, even years, on one theme. In Beethoven's lifetime, he wrote 32 piano sonatas. And I would like to play for you now his sonatina in G. And sonatina actually is a small sonata. Beethoven was only 32 when he lost his hearing. Already at 28, he was losing his hearing, and he said, "To be forced to become a philosopher is not easy, less easy for the artist than any other. O Divine One, Thou lookest down into my innermost soul. Thou seest into my heart, and knowest that love of mankind and a desire to do good dwelleth therein. O man, when some day ye shall read these words, reflect that ye wronged me, and let the child of misfortune be comforted that he has found one like himself, who, despite all the obstacles that nature has thrown in his way, yet did all that lay within his power to be received into the ranks of worthy artists and men." End of quote. Now, at this time, I would like to play for you Beethoven's beautiful Adagio combined with the hymn Love Divine. The last song that I would like to play for you is Adieu to the Piano. Now, this song has been attributed to Beethoven, but there is question as to whether actually it is one of his compositions. Now, during the 19th century, there was unscrupulous publishers who would try to improve their sales on their works by putting Beethoven's name onto them. So perhaps this very pretty little song was not written by Beethoven, although it is listed in the Library of Congress that it is by Beethoven. Now, during the French Revolution, Beethoven was in his teens. Beethoven was at heart a Democrat, and what he heard of the revolution must have affected him very deeply. Now, later, the aftermath of the French Revolution and the behavior of Napoleon, it bitterly disappointed him. Now, he was also disappointed with Vienna, being the capital of a completely autocratic empire. It is said that Beethoven dedicated this adieu to the piano to his patron and friend, who was Archduke Rudolph of Austria. Now, the Archduke, he was leaving to go to war. Napoleon and his army were at the gates. And when many of Beethoven's aristocratic friends there fled Vienna, there was no guarantee that the composer would ever see any of them again. It was said that Beethoven actually did not have many friends. He had a haughty nature, and he felt shame over his affliction in going deaf. Most of his friends were either students or nobility. Now, when the cannonade began, Beethoven, he spent hours in a basement with pillows over his ears just to protect the little hearing that he had. It would have been a time of fear and sadness for the composer. Now, it's been said that it was these emotions that helped to produce this song, Adieu to the Piano, if Beethoven actually did compose this little song. So at this time, I would like to play for you this song. believe that Beethoven was definitely one of the greatest of the classical composers. He was a true artist, capable of an almost universal range of expression. It seems that there was scarcely a human feeling that Beethoven could not express. Some of these feelings are not accessible even in words, but are able to be expressed in music. Now, I hope that you have enjoyed this little musical. If you have, I would encourage you to click on that like and the subscribe button and check out some of my other musicals that I have done on the classical greats. So I want to thank you all for listening, and I'm wishing God's blessings.